Lyndon B. Johnson once said, "If future generations are to remember us with gratitude rather than contempt, we must leave them something more than the miracles of technology. We must leave them a glimpse of the world as it was in the beginning, not just after we got through with it." For over 100 years, the National Park Service has been working to preserve the natural and cultural resources within the parks. Today, the service is still working to conserve the scenery and wildlife, as well as provide enjoyment for generations upon generations. Conservationists sought to regulate human use, while preservationists sought to eliminate human impact altogether. Both of these methods were useful ways to protect the lands which are now parts of the national parks. But these large areas of wildlife haven't always been protected. On August 25, 1916, the National Park Service was founded when President Woodrow Wilson signed off on the Organic Act. Within the United States, over 83 million acres of land in 49 states are part of the National Park System. However, none of this would have been possible without the work of two influential leaders. Theodore Roosevelt, President of the United States, and John Muir, founder of the Sierra Club, worked separately towards a common goal of protecting the lands of the national parks. Naturalist, scholar, cowboy, author, war hero, Nobel Prize winner, explorer, and President of the United States. Theodore Roosevelt was all of these. When Europeans first arrived in the New World, they viewed the lands as limitless and they felt they existed for the benefit of the people. However, they soon began to discover that these resources weren't going to last forever. Theodore Roosevelt's growing interest in conservation developed from his experiences in the Dakota Badlands. He said, "No sight is more common on the plains than that of a bleached buffalo skull." The upsetting realization of their abundance over time led him to form the Boone and Crockett Club. The club aimed to preserve the big game animals for hunting but had a larger effect of growing their concern and knowledge about habitat and the environment. Beginning in the 1870s, naturalists, hunters, and fishing clubs urged local governments to protect the environment as big corporations took shape. However, Roosevelt's club had connections in Washington. Early in his political career, he worked at the Civil Service Commission, although he spent much of his time lobbying for his own campaign. As a result, in 1890, the Congress passed the Forest Reserve Act, which gave the president the right to set aside forest reserves separate from public lands. The Park Protection Act was passed 3 years later, which ended up saving the lands in Yellowstone National Park from becoming a railroad route. As governor of New York, he also made many important reforms, such as educating the public in lessons in ecology and creating laws against jacklighting. When Theodore Roosevelt was president, it was the first time a naturalist was living in the White House. He felt very strongly that just as the people, through their government, must control big business for the common good, so must they control the nation's natural resources. He also addressed an earlier call of help from Francis G. Newlands, urging Congress to help with the lack of water in the Southwest, later resulting in the Reclamation Act. His strong passion for protecting trees led him to triple the area set aside by all past presidents for forests. When Roosevelt took office, there were 5 national parks established, but he convinced Congress to add another 5. He helped to save places of unique historical and cultural value. The National Monuments Act in 1906 was also passed with his help in order to protect many historic sites. Gifford Pinchot, who was the first head of the U.S. forest system, once said, "The greatest work that Theodore Roosevelt did for the United States, the great fact which will give his influence, vitality, and power long after we shall have gone to our reward, is the fact that he changed the attitude of the American people towards conserving the natural resources." However, Theodore Roosevelt wasn't the only influential figure in working towards founding the national parks. John Muir was also an important factor. How could Americans, who are surrounded by a continent filled with marvels and sublime natural beauty, not be touched or even mildly interested in these spectacular features. John Muir often pondered this. In 1867, Muir began his 1,000-mile walk to Florida and the Gulf of Mexico. He started his hike in Kentucky to study Mammoth Cave. Next, Muir explored through the Cumberland Mountains in Tennessee and continued south to Georgia. John Muir finished his 1,000-mile hike in less than 2 months and ended up in Cedar Key, Florida. After that, Muir was planning to go to South America, but he contracted malaria, so instead he went to San Francisco to see the wilderness of the Sierra and saw Yosemite for the first time. In 1890, Muir decided that he wanted to save Yosemite by writing essays about it and why it should be preserved. Muir began writing his century series of essays, which explained the healing powers of nature. In Muir's first article, which was published in August of 1890, Treasures of the Yosemite, talked about his experience of exploring in Yosemite and the Sierra. Muir's second article, Features of the Proposed Yosemite National Park, was published in September 1890 and focused on the beautiful areas of the park. This article also included a map of the proposed boundaries. In the fall of 1890, Muir's map of the proposed boundaries was included in a House of Representatives bill to create the national park, and in September 1890, President Benjamin Harrison signed the bill into a law. Muir's writings not only convinced the government to protect Yosemite, but also Sequoia, Grand Canyon, and Mount Rainier as national parks. Muir's essays about Yosemite had made him famous, and he had attracted a lot of supporters. This success led Muir to the idea of creating an organization that would encourage preservation of the wilderness. The first meeting was in May 1892 and was called the Sierra Club. The founders of the club elected John Muir as its first president. The Sierra Club fought many battles to protect Yosemite and the Sierra Nevada. One of the most significant battles was the campaign to prevent the damming of the Hetch Hetchy Valley in Yosemite, and in 1913 the battle was lost. The following year, Muir died of pneumonia while visiting his daughter. John Muir taught the people of his time and ours the importance of experiencing and protecting our natural heritage. His words have heightened our perception of nature. For the past 100 years, the national park system has developed immensely. From beautiful unprotected lands, valleys, and forests, the system has grown to major tourist attractions. You can still see the beauty today that Theodore Roosevelt and John Muir experienced through their very own eyes. Back in 1903, they experienced the glorious wonders of Yosemite National Park when they set out on their very own camping trip. There, they laid the foundations for Roosevelt's innovative conservation programs. The experiences Muir and Roosevelt had then have been carried through the generations because of their dedication to protect these lands. Theodore Roosevelt stated in his autobiography, "I shall always be glad that I was in Yosemite with John Muir." His emphasis on the importance of nature and the meaning it brought to him has had a powerful impact on people who explore the very same land he once stood on. It is hard to picture what the park system would be today if it weren't for the work of Theodore Roosevelt and John Muir. To this day, current presidents are still working to preserve these lands, and Barack Obama stated, "We have to have the foresight and the faith in the future to protect our parks and to protect our planet for the generations to come." The very important message from 1916 still rings true 100 years later. Nearly 84 million acres, visited by over 300 million people, protected because of the passion and potential seen by Theodore Roosevelt and John Muir.